says reform takes time. Foreign police contingents and the UN will continue to train for years to come in institutions like the National Police Academy.
To build a police force, it takes at least one generation. And we believe that what was done so far and what it will be done until UN one day will leave, it will provide our Timorese counterparts, Polícia Nacional Timor-Leste, with the proper tools to answer to any type of incident.
But the triggers for instability are overwhelming. East Timor's population is rapidly rising, placing pressure on the country's land and housing.
But I think both as the population grows and as some of the strains on that population grow over time, it will be important for the police to increase their ability to be seen as a responder to local problems, to be able to filter things through the justice system and produce results.
Unemployment is a growing problem in East Timor, particularly amongst the youth. 40% of the population here live below the poverty line, and social divisions which caused violence in the past still exist. Osvaldo is jobless, but lives with relatives. He says the frustrations created by unemployment are real security concerns.
Most of the youth and people my age have no job. It's very easy for them to commit crimes, get involved in gangs, and create conflicts and more problems. Bad things happen because of no jobs.
But good things happen too. It's enrolment time, and 20,000 young Timorese filter into the police academy to apply to become a recruit. Standards are high. Only 250 will be accepted, joining the ranks of men like Commander Da Costa. But East Timor will need the best if it's to face the challenge of going it alone.
That report from Drew Ambrose. For more on the issue of national security in East Timor, we're here in the capital, Dili. Joining us on the panel, Jose Antonio Bello is a veteran journalist and director of Tempo Seminar, a Dili-based newspaper. Professor Damien Kingsbury heads the School of International and Political Studies at Deakin University, Australia. And rounding off the panel is Francisco Guterres, East Timor's Secretary of State for Security. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Mr. Guterres, if I could start with you. The UN police have been handing over policing matters and responsibilities to the local police now over the last year or so. How confident are you that East Timor's police can take over national security?
First of all, I'd like to thank that the UN have. We see that there are a lot of improvement in the police. From our side, the government also, when we took the office in 2007, we started a reform into the police institution. So we're quite a little bit confident in that at this stage that once the UN leave in 2012, Timorese police will take over the responsibility, and then I'm quite sure there will be no
Damien Kingsbury, are you just as confident?
I have more reservations. I think we've got to go back to the basics, and that is that when Timor-Leste became independent, there was an aspiration period, and in many respects the police are continuing to replicate the models that were here in the mid-90s. They were trained by the Indonesians. Many of the police are those who were employed by the Indonesians, and many of the practices continue to reflect the Indonesian era: corruption, business activities, brutality, unaccountability. So whilst there are improvements, I don't think they're quite there yet.
Jose Bello, how much confidence does the East Timorese people, or do they?
For me, as a Timorese, we have to be optimistic.
Being optimistic is one thing. Are they confident that the police force will be able to take over national security?
Well, the police force is still weak and fragile, and it still needs more help. But the UN has failed to help this Timorese police force to be moving as professional as it is.
In what way? How?
Well, the UN police, you can see on the street here, they're just driving their big bank cars, just driving like mad. And they are not really helping the Timorese police up in the districts.
Francisco Gutierrez, it doesn't sound like the local police will be able to take over at all.
I think many of the internationals are looking at the situation before 2006. They didn't really look at what we are doing right now. They don't want to understand what we are doing right now. To be honest, I agree with Zabello that, to be honest, since 2006 up until now, we see that there are a lot of improvement, and then UN is doing nothing. I always say to many people about the UN is only fast in doing report. But in terms of action, they are doing nothing.
What do you mean by doing nothing? What can they do? What should have they been doing in the last 10 years?
You can look at that in the village, in the sub-district. There is no UN police over there. There are only police officers working in the sub-district. I don't really agree that with James as well is saying that, well, the police is really corrupt. It's not. Now you are building, we are start building. You cannot compare a police of 8 years old with a police in New York in Australia. It's something different. They took 200 years to build this police to become a good one.
Damien Kingsbury, do you think the UN has failed in terms of trying to get East Timor's police up to scratch?
The UN has drawn from a very wide base, and many of the police that they've brought here have themselves not been at the top of the level of performance. There's no doubt about that. But there's also a cultural issue, and I don't mean Timorese culture, I mean the culture of the police force, which continues from the Indonesian period. It continued up until 2006. And whilst the Timorese police force, the PNTL, has been rebuilt since 2006, it continues to have elements of that culture in it, which are very, very difficult to resolve and to overcome. I think the real question is, yes, the UN hasn't done a great job. There are limits to what it could achieve. The question is what sort of program will go forward into the future to assist the PNTL to become even better.
Francisco Gutierrez, what do you think that program should be?
You have to provide them a future into the institution itself, the police. We come up with we call it the promotion regime, career regime. The career regime provides them a future into the PNTL. From that, you can motivate them to start working professionally. So I think this is something we're going very slow, but gradual.
Jose Bello, is this a question of training or is this a question of resources?
Well, it's a matter of mix, actually. Yeah, it's from the beginning, the setup itself, it has been wrong setup, and it's becoming like this. We have to deal with this kind of problem. The chain command of the PNTL is still weak. FFTTL, the external security defense, are strong enough because of the chain command is strong.
Is it then fair to ask the foreign forces to leave in 2012? It really doesn't sound like East Timor's National Police can take on security at all. Damien.
Can I just say that I respect the improvements and the reforms that the government's been making. They have been making a real effort, and they have been recognising and tackling the problem, and I think we should recognise that and acknowledge that. And the UN has failed, and it hasn't done an adequate job. The question is how do we transition forward beyond 2012? Is the answer to cut out training entirely, external training, or is the answer